So let's see, I've watched 3 things this week. Only 3 things, huh? I guess I've played a lot of Minecraft. And I guess because of the anime I was watching, I didn't do a lot of anime watching on the side while doing that. And there was moving a couple of stuff out, so some evenings were spent doing that. And there was taking a look at the apartment I am thinking about moving into at the end of the year if I go that route, etc., etc. So basically, those 3 series. Let's begin with Tales from Earthsea, the latest Studio Ghibli DVD released. This one was directed by Miyazaki's son instead of Miyazaki himself. Now, the truth of the matter is, I can't actually tell if that really made a difference or not. It's not immediately obvious to me how a director's influence presents itself in the final medium per se. I could maybe understand vague concepts, but the reason I mentioned a lot of this is Tales from Earthsea. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't good. The real problem watching it is you kind of watch it and you're wondering why you're watching it. It doesn't really feel like it sets up an obvious reason why we're watching our main characters or why certain events are happening in the world. I think part of this could be that I believe it's based upon ideas from like 4 of the Earthsea books, unless there's only 4, in which case it would be all of the Earthsea books, unless there aren't 4, in which case I heard wrong. The basic idea being that someone like me who has never experienced any Earthsea stuff whatsoever, watching this, I'm kind of lost as to what I should be thinking, what I should be hoping for, what I should be expecting to happen as it progresses. Um, and I watched this with another person. He actually said it first, although I get the impression we were both thinking it as we watched it. So I wouldn't be surprised if I heard other people had similar experiences with it. I guess this is a chance for you to mention in the comments what you thought. But at the same time, it wasn't exactly bad, and it didn't really seem completely pointless overall, just sort of maybe directionless or something. Like, you didn't really know where the story was trying to go, and even after watching it afterwards, I don't quite understand why it should have necessarily gone that way. Now, let's contrast this with something else I watched earlier. So, the friend I watched it with had never seen Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is something that I grew up watching. Actually, the butchered English dub version, Warriors of the Wind, but still the same anime, other than the fact that the actual Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is a bit more in depth. Maybe a bit more is putting it lightly. But the basic idea is that we watched Nausicaa a day or 2 later, and he described it. He described it as beautiful. I don't know if that was language intended to pad my ego, so to speak. But I mean, I certainly felt it was, but I don't know how much of that was nostalgia. Basically, Nausicaa, you kind of feel like the story is building up and progressing somewhere as it goes. And I think maybe that's the general idea of what was missing from Earthsea. I'd like to say that Princess Mononoke necessarily felt the same way, but I think Mononoke is kind of set up in a different way where it kind of introduces a bunch of threads, and instead of things building up into craziness, it just, I think it goes there a little bit quicker than like Nausicaa or something like that. Maybe that's why I like Nausicaa more than Mononoke, but I'm not sure. That's just guessing. Anyways, long story short, Nausicaa is still my favorite, but I don't know how much of that's nostalgia versus it being inherently better or something like that. Oh well. Anyways, the other thing I watched was the series Maid Sama, or rather the first 13 episodes of it that came out on DVD last week. And I actually thought it was pretty entertaining. I'm not a big fan of the whole girl who hates guys thing, but at the same time, um, it kind of presented itself well. I'm not saying necessarily in that respect, and it's not actually obvious that she hates guys so much as she just has some bad preconceived notions of what guys do that the writers of the anime also have, so that a lot of the characters do this sort of stuff. But the thing about it that was really neat was actually the fact, I guess, two things. First of all, I was actually quite surprised that certain elements of the story did not become recurring elements. Where usually they introduce a character of certain kinds and you see them kind of pushing their same behavior over. It's like a lot of shows really like to focus on those funny things, even if those funny things may outlive their welcome. They don't always, but I think Maid Sama played it safe by pretty much sticking with fresh material episode on an episode by episode basis. I thought it was pretty entertaining because of that. Also, well, I don't know. There's just the little quirks here and there that make it enjoyable to watch. The other thing that, I guess, what made it enjoyable to watch is the guy. He actually reminds me of the little kid from Kodocha. I think that's a child's toy in English or something. Maybe full name Kodomo no Omacha or something. I don't pretend to know for certain. I really should have looked that up before coming up here and talking. But the basic idea is they're very similar. Seemingly indifferent, influential, quiet character, I guess, who just so happens to like the main character who doesn't exactly appreciate that attention and or doesn't like to think of it that way. Although in Kodocha it was probably more blatant, whereas in Maid Sama she's trying to pretend that that's not the case or something like that. That's not to say that it's... I guess what I'm saying is it's kind of interesting because it almost feels like there's an element of 90s anime love story in there that I almost can't help but wonder has been... Maybe it's 80s I'm thinking about. I'm not sure. But it feels like there's a subtle romantic element there that tended to be in certain genres that I don't see more recently. Maybe they're just not bringing them over. Or maybe it's trying to experiment with something that they're like, why did we get rid of this? This was actually kind of a neat thing. Let's update it for modern anime or something like that. I'm not quite sure if y'all understand what I'm saying, but that's the general idea, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's all the stuff I watched this week. I didn't really play anything worth mentioning, so the only thing that really leaves is next weekend. I'm probably going to prioritize Vampire in the Bund, simply because that's a very, it's a controversial. I wouldn't say it's very controversial. A title like that would probably be reserved for something like Domo no Jikan. But Vampire in the Bund is controversial insofar as, like, Funimation licensed it. And then later they announced that they were going to release it censored. And they have been pretty good about not censoring anything up till now, ignoring their older flirt with 4Kids stuff. Basically, nowadays, if you buy a Funimation DVD, you are pretty much guaranteed to get something that's uncut, unedited, etc. Subtitles always being an option, etc. Now, I think the public backlash from the Vampire in the Bund announcement made them hold their tongue and reconsider if maybe they were going to do a director's cut version. And I think in the end they have not edited it, but I should really watch it and maybe look for people's opinions to give you all a good idea. So I guess I'll watch it a little more carefully to see if there's any noticeable edits or something. I don't know. But yeah, the other thing is, I kind of am curious about controversial shows, and I have ideas on how this one is controversial, so watching it to prove that that's the case is, well, I guess a priority of sorts. Anyways, that's this week's anime analysis, and I guess a sort of preview on what I'm thinking for next week's. So, yeah, I'll see y'all then.